What is up, guys? Rick Kakis here. Thank you so much for stopping by, and today we are going to be showcasing gameplay, first impressions, features, and more with my hands-on with the brand new Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So huge shout out to Ubisoft for giving me this opportunity, and of course wasn't able to actually travel to Ubisoft to play this game. Instead, using an app, it was kind of live streamed to my personal home desktop. So the downside of that is that there was a little bit of input lag. If you see me miss a really obvious bow shot, that is why. I swear it's not just because I'm terrible. But in addition to that, luckily, I actually just came off of playing a ton of Assassin's Creed Odyssey during the last season of Destiny 2, when it was kind of some downtime. So I'm going to be able to really elaborate on the differences between Valhalla and Odyssey for you Assassin's Creed fans out there. So let's get started. And let's start with the overall gameplay experience of Valhalla. Something I noticed right away is that it seems to be moving in a little bit more of a hardcore direction, a little bit more of a grounded direction. You feel a little bit bigger, potentially even slower than you did in Odyssey, but your attacks feel like they have more weight behind them. You kind of do feel like a Viking versus, a Greek or Spartan warrior as you did in Odyssey. And some examples of how it is becoming a little bit more, as I said, hardcore is, well, the eagle mechanic, or as this time it's a crow, I believe. But before in Odyssey, you would just kind of swing by an enemy camp and it would just automatically spot all the enemies in there and all of the chest locations in there, and then you would stroll in and either assassinate or take everyone down. This time, however, you're going to have to manually spot all the enemies. And at first, I was kind of annoyed by this. I was like, this is going to take so much longer. But by the end, it did feel a lot more involved. You had to invest time into actually legitimately scouting the area, and if you made a mistake, if you missed an enemy that you didn't see was hiding under a tree or just sitting in a weird spot, your whole plan for how to infiltrate that area could just go out the window, and then suddenly you're fighting a bunch of enemies when you were planning on using stealth. So again, you actually have to be a little bit more involved in scouting and planning and all of that stuff. However, that eagle mechanic is not the only way that you can scout ahead for enemies and plan your engagements. One of the new mechanics introduced within Valhalla is something called Odin's Sight, and this releases a pulse around you and highlights anything nearby. So that would be potentially treasure chests, loot, but also enemies, and those enemies will be kind of highlighted red. So you don't necessarily have to rely all on that scouting mechanic. You can just go in for the assassination and then just Odin sight your way through and take out enemies as you see them. Something else new you probably just noticed is a new assassination feature when it comes to more powerful enemies. Normally you'd assassinate them and it would only take away a chunk of their health, leaving them to fight you afterwards. But now there's a little bit of a mini game and you're supposed to stop when the lines are within the red lines. It was communicated a little bit wrong to me, so I thought they had to touch together. So you'll see me mess it up and then I get in a fight. But if I was to do it properly, you will assassinate those higher tier enemies right off the bat and you won't have to fight them after. Now, when I played Odyssey, I was fully spec'd into assassinations. I would go into a castle, take people down one by one, drag all their bodies away, and eventually it would only be me and the boss, and I would take them on after that, and I loved that style of gameplay. So, in the background, you're going to see me trying to replicate that with certain encounters, and for the most part, it does feel very similar in a good way to Assassin's Creed Odyssey. You're yet again using the environmental cover with shrubs and tall grass to disguise yourself, and you're trying to move in as close as possible, kill one enemy, you can drag their body around, and this time, you can actually do more stuff with their bodies. You can throw them and all that stuff a lot easier, so you can have more control over where you're hiding them. And the assassinations are as brutal and visceral as ever. So it's a pretty similar experience to previous Assassin's Creeds, with the main difference being that setup process is going to be a little bit more involved, scouting with the eagle or using Odin sight to figure out where your enemies are and plan your assassinations. However, there are some pretty big changes to the other style of gameplay, which is just hack and slash. Forget assassinations, forget stealth, go in there and start schwangin'. So, some of the changes include, firstly, raiding parties. This is a really interesting mechanic. So, getting to that, firstly, let's talk a little bit about your ship. So, your longship, your Viking longship, previously, you could only use your ship to traverse the ocean and you were just island hopping with it. But now, you can actually use your longship to wind in between rivers. So you can go pretty far inland with your ship. And that matters when it comes to the raiding parties, as I've said. So you can actually, as you pull up to a settlement or a castle or whatever that's on the bank of a river, you can start a raiding party, and your crew from your longship, which just like Odyssey, you're going to recruit different members of your crew as you play through the game. So you can spec up your crew and get great people, and then they're all part of this crazy raiding party that you all jump off the longship and go and invade the castle. And honestly, that makes the hack and slash part of Assassin's Creed feel a lot better. Like previously, it was you versus the world for the most part, except for the faction wars in Odyssey. But if you got caught in the middle of a castle, it was just you versus like 20 other guys. But now you can go in with allies, you're reviving people, they're actually helping you, they're engaging other enemies, so you can kind of pick off 1 or 2 enemies at a time and then go and help your raiding party finish off the guys they're fighting. It feels a lot smoother. And so, where I was previously spec'd into assassinations and stealth for Odyssey, I think I'm going to spec into combat for Valhalla. Because that combat also carries forward a little bit of those hardcore aspects, so to speak. It's very punishing if you miss a block or if you miss a dodge, but also it's very rewarding if you time that properly. One of the weapons I was using was a flail, and I would just whip it around and combo off on people. Like, as you can see, you hit them so many times in a row, and that feels amazing when you can do a good parry and go in with so many different smacks. But also, one of the features I really loved is bows. So I was also spec'd into archery quite a bit for Odyssey. Felt really good to just take out enemies with a single bow shot. That is still very much in Valhalla, but something you Assassin's Creed aficionados will really enjoy is that the bow combat has really been mixed up, because now there's 3 different kinds of bows. Essentially, gear is broken down into 3 different categories. And that is wolf gear, bear gear, and raven gear. So, as you spec into different things within your skill tree, you're going to spec into certain points for those 3 different categories. Like, you can spec into a bear by going down the red trees, and so your bear gear will become more powerful. But going back into the bows, there is like a predator bow, which is the wolf bow, there is a bear bow, and there is a raven bow, essentially. And so I believe the wolf is like the normal bow from Odyssey, right? But then I believe the bear is rapid fire. Like you can see in the background, you just go yeet, 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 but you can't aim down the sights and get those incredibly powerful one-shot headshots. But if you are someone going in hack and slash, you want the rapid fire bow for sure. But then there's also the raven bow, I believe, and that is the one that aims down sights, like almost like a first-person shooter, as you can see. So that one is also fantastic for headshots, but a little bit more long range with this one. So you can really mix it up depending on what kind of gear you're using. But continuing on this breakdown of these 3 different aspects, I mentioned speccing out your skill tree, but as you can see, the skill tree is something that I believe has vastly improved from Odyssey. I wasn't a huge fan of Odyssey's skill tree because, like I said, I wanted to spec into assassinations and stealth and then bows. So I would get so many level up tokens and ability tokens that I wouldn't want to spend. I'd just be sitting there until I got to a certain level that would unlock the assassination ability or the stealth ability that I actually wanted, and I'd finally be able to take it. But in Valhalla, it's a lot more involved. You get quite a few skill points, but as you can see, the skill tree is broken up into kind of a constellation arrangement. So as you level up different nodes, they're going to give you minor bonuses like more melee damage, more bow damage, increased stealth, etc. And as you level up those little nodes, you eventually then unlock the big abilities, which do crazy things. So, at least in my experience with the game, there wasn't a point where you were just waiting around to hit a certain level so you could finally spend your skill points. You were quite often spending skill points along the way, and even if you couldn't reach a certain main skill you were going for, you were increasing these other aspects of your character. Now, in terms of general gameplay, there was a lot of things that just made the world feel alive. Like, I ran into these random children who stole an offering, and I talked to them and eventually gave them some money or whatever, but there's another girl who had this horse that was across the river, and I had to bring it back to her and all this stuff. And it's just those things that make the world feel lived in. Stuff is going on, but also those world events will give you substantial amounts of experience, so it actually feels, worth doing, and they definitely feel more engaging, more fleshed out. There's usually like full cutscenes that go behind them than in Odyssey, where it was always just like, hey, a bandit pushed me over, can you go and kill the bandits? Like, every single time that happened. The world events within Valhalla, at least what I experienced, seemed quite different from one another and just felt better. However, it wasn't all roses. Even though I did enjoy my play session overall, and I'm definitely getting this game, there were a couple of things I didn't like too much. Firstly, underwater was super boring. Like, I found literally nothing. I tried to go through some rivers and so on. Maybe they just haven't put all the assets in, but even in a large ocean area, nothing. And I was constantly using Odin's Sight to try to find treasure chests, etc. That was one of the things I actually did enjoy with Odyssey, is going down and diving through shipwrecks, and there was like secret tunnels to new areas and really cool stuff underwater. I felt that was pretty flushed out when I didn't expect it to be, so Valhalla felt worse in that department, again, from what I was able to play. Another thing I was a little bit unsure of is the loot. There was almost no loot, and again, this could just be because of the version I played, the demo version, but I opened so many chests. Like, I would go after chests. It actually would showcase where wealth chests were on the map, and so I would go to these different areas, and once you got one, it would kind of show where the other one was. And I'm pretty sure I got either all or all but one of the wealth chests in the entire area that we were able to go. And again, I got like no loot. I got a flail and then an extra bow or two, and that's about it. And it felt quite a bit worse than Odyssey, where you're getting a lot of loot and you're changing your build around and getting cool stuff with cool abilities. So hopefully they expand on that a little bit more, but it could also be part of them going for the hardcore feeling, is that, not every single chest has an amazing axe in it, right? Those are going to be a little bit more sparse, and instead, potentially, Valhalla is going to be more focused on getting good loot and upgrading it and perfecting your build and abilities, rather than just constantly changing out your gear all the time, which I will admit, Odyssey by the end did get pretty annoying with just how much gear you would get, and you'd delete most of it. So I can see what they were going for, but it did also feel bad to take down an entire castle, and then you'd open the chest at the end, and you get like basic supplies, and you're like, aw. In any event, guys, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed, found this informative, and if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Assassin's Creed Valhalla videos, let me know in the comment section down below. If you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.